Welcome back to Bible Chat. You know, today we're taking a deep dive into Matthew chapter 26.
Oh, yeah.
Really a pivotal chapter, leading up to Jesus' crucifixion.
It is.
And I don't know about you, but every time I read through Matthew 26,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just struck by how much is packed in to these
Yeah.
verses. You've got betrayal, you've got extravagant generosity,
Right.
these tense final moments before,
Yeah.
everything changes.
It really lays the groundwork for everything that's going to happen
It does.
in the
Yeah.
gospel. And it starts right from the beginning with a stark contrast.
Okay.
On the one hand, you have the religious leaders plotting to kill Jesus secretly.
Yeah, it's almost chilling how calculated it is. Matthew tells us they're worried about causing an uproar,
Mm.
especially during Passover.
Right.
What does that tell you about their priorities?
Well, I think it reveals a lot about how they view Jesus and his growing influence. It
Right.
wasn't just about theological differences.
Right.
They were afraid of the social and political consequences.
Yeah.
Passover was a time of heightened
Right.
religious and national fervor, and they didn't want to risk a disruption.
And then we have this incredible story of the woman who anoints Jesus with this expensive perfume.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine being there in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
The disciples are scandalized by what seems like such a wasteful act.
They are very practical, and they think that this perfume should be sold and the money given to the poor.
Right.
But Jesus defends her
He does.
and says that she has prepared him for burial.
Oh, talk about foreshadowing. It's like
Yes.
this sudden shadow just falls over the entire scene.
It is a very powerful foreshadowing of Jesus's impending death.
Yes.
But it's even more than that,
Right.
because Jesus actually elevates this act
Yeah.
and says that it will be remembered wherever the gospel is preached. So
Right.
it's like this seemingly small private act of devotion becomes the symbol of the global spread of Christianity.
That connection just gives me chills every time I read it. Because it makes you think about those small, seemingly insignificant acts of faith and love
Yeah.
that can ripple out in ways we never expect.
It does, and it speaks to the profound impact that genuine devotion to Jesus can have,
Yes.
even when it doesn't make immediate practical sense.
And then just when we're reflecting on this act of love and devotion,
Right.
the narrative takes this sharp, dark turn, and we encounter Judas,
Yeah.
one of the 12 disciples,
Mm-hmm.
making a deal to betray Jesus.
And for such a paltry sum of money,
It's unbelievable.
30 pieces of silver.
I know the contrast between the woman's selfless generosity
Yes.
and Judas's greed
greed-driven betrayal.
is just jarring.
It is.
It's one of those things that every time I read it, I just think, how could someone who walked with Jesus, witnessed his miracles,
Right.
listened to his teachings, do something like that? It just
Yeah.
boggles the mind.
Well, it really raises these profound questions about the nature of discipleship and just
Yeah.
the complexities of the human heart. Even those closest to Jesus can be tempted, can choose darkness over light.
It's a sobering reminder that following Jesus isn't a guarantee of immunity
Right.
from sin or struggles,
Absolutely.
but it also underscores the power of forgiveness and redemption.
Yes.
Even in the face of betrayal, Jesus offers a path back
No.
to him.
Yes.
And then we arrive at this pivotal moment
Mm-hmm.
that has shaped Christian practice for centuries.
Right.
The Last Supper.
Yeah.
I mean, what's fascinating to me is how Jesus takes this traditional Passover meal
Yes.
and uses it to establish something entirely new.
It's a brilliant example of how Jesus took existing cultural and religious frameworks and infused them with new meaning.
Yeah.
Passover commemorated God's deliverance of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt.
Wow.
And Jesus, knowing that his own sacrifice is imminent,
Yes.
transforms this meal into a symbol of his body and blood,
Mm-hmm.
a new covenant of freedom and redemption.
It's mind-blowing to think about how this one meal became the foundation for a ritual practiced by millions
Yes.
around the world for centuries.
Yeah.
The bread and wine, ordinary elements,
Mm-hmm.
become these profound symbols of sacrifice
Right.
and communion.
Yes.
It's such a tangible way for believers to participate
Yeah.
in this new covenant
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus establishes
Through his death.
through his death.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere at this Last Supper is far from celebratory.
It's not.
There's this heavy tension hanging over everything.
Yeah, there's a sense of foreboding
Yeah.
as Jesus predicts his own betrayal.
I mean, he even names Judas,
He does.
creating this incredibly charged moment at the table.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine being one of those other disciples.
I know.
Your friend, your teacher, your Messiah is telling you he's going to be betrayed,
Yeah.
and By one of your own?
One of your
It
own.
must have been absolutely devastating.
Yeah, it's this moment of intense drama,
Yes.
and it only escalates from there.
And as if things weren't tense enough, as they're leaving the meal, Jesus makes another startling prediction that Peter, the rock, the one who just declared his unwavering loyalty, will deny him 3 times.
And Peter, so sure of himself, vehemently denies it.
He does.
But you know, reading this, knowing what's coming, it's heartbreaking.
It really is.
It sets up this powerful lesson about the unpredictable nature of faith
Yeah.
under pressure.
We'll dive into the consequences of those words in just a moment. But before we do, I think it's interesting that Peter makes this bold claim
Yeah.
of, I'll never deny you, I'll always be with you.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times have we felt that same unwavering conviction,
Right.
only to find ourselves faltering later?
That's a good point. Peter's story is a reminder that none of us are immune to doubt or weakness.
But it also offers hope, because it doesn't end with his denial.
It doesn't. There's redemption in the story yet to come.
Yes.
But first, we need to follow Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane,
Yes.
where we see him wrestling with the full weight of what's to come.
And that's where Matthew 26 gets incredibly raw and personal.
It does.
We see Jesus in anguish,
Yes.
praying for this cup of suffering to pass.
Yeah, and what's striking to me is the way Matthew captures Jesus' humanity in this scene. He's not a stoic figure detached from suffering. He experiences the full force of human emotion.
Right.
Fear, anguish, even a desire to avoid pain.
Yet even in his agony, he submits to God's will.
He does.
It's such a profound example of surrender and obedience.
His prayer, "Not my will, but yours be done," is one of the most powerful expressions of trust and submission in all of Scripture.
It's a prayer that resonates with anyone who has ever faced a difficult situation and struggled to find peace in God's plan.
Absolutely.
It teaches us that true surrender isn't about passivity. It's about aligning our desires with God's will, even when it's painful.
Yes.
And just when you think things can't get any more intense, Judas arrives with these armed men to arrest Jesus.
And he betrays Jesus with a kiss.
I know, this symbol of love and affection twisted into a tool of deceit.
It's such a jarring juxtaposition,
It is.
highlighting the depth of Judas's betrayal.
Yeah, it's almost unbearable to read.
Yeah.
And then one of Jesus' disciples tries to defend him with a sword,
Oh, yeah.
but Jesus stops him, emphasizing that his path is one of peaceful submission.
Right. It's a pivotal moment.
It is.
That reveals Jesus' commitment to nonviolence. Even in the face of aggression, he refuses to resort to force.
Such a radical choice that challenges us to examine our own responses to conflict and injustice.
Yes.
And so Jesus is arrested, setting the stage for the trial and crucifixion that await him.
It does. So as we move into the second half of Matthew chapter 26, the tension just keeps ratcheting up.
It does.
Jesus is now in the hands of the religious authorities.
Right.
And things are about to get even more complicated.
Yeah, it's almost like we're shifting gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
We move from this really personal, intimate betrayal
Yeah.
to this more formal legal setting.
Exactly.
Jesus is brought before the high priest, Caiaphas,
Right.
and the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council.
That's right.
And it's here that we really see the clash between Jesus' ministry and the established religious order come to a head.
They're actively seeking to condemn him,
Yeah.
to silence his message.
It's not a fair trial.
No, it's a setup.
And they bring in all these witnesses, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find some evidence, some accusation that will stick.
Right.
But it's interesting, even with all their efforts, their case seems pretty weak.
Matthew really highlights how they struggle to find any substantial evidence against Jesus.
Yeah.
Even the testimonies that they gather are inconsistent and contradictory.
Right.
It's almost like their attempts to discredit him only serve to highlight his innocence.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But then the high priest takes matters into his own hands
Right.
and puts Jesus under oath, demanding to know if he is the Christ,
Yes.
the Son of God.
Big question.
Talk about a pivotal moment.
This is the moment of truth.
Yeah.
Jesus could have remained silent,
Right.
could have tried to deflect the question. But instead, he responds with a bold declaration. You have said so.
Wow, such a powerful statement.
It is.
He doesn't shy away from his true identity, even though he knows it will have consequences.
And the consequences are immediate.
Yeah,
The religious leaders are outraged.
they are.
They see his claim as blasphemy, a direct challenge to their authority,
Yeah.
and a violation of God's holiness.
It's a stark reminder of how threatening truth can be.
Yeah.
especially when it disrupts the status quo.
Especially when it disrupts the status quo.
And it leads directly to Jesus' condemnation.
It does, and now, while all of this is unfolding
Right.
in the halls of power, Matthew also gives us these glimpses of what's happening with Peter.
Yeah.
Remember that earlier in chapter 26, Jesus predicted that Peter would deny him 3 times.
Yeah, I kept picturing Peter watching all this unfold from a distance. You know, he's seen Jesus arrested, he's heard the accusations,
Right.
and I think now he's just caught in this web of fear and self-preservation.
And one by one, those denials come.
They do?
First, he's questioned by a servant girl,
Right.
then by another bystander, and finally by a group of people.
Yeah.
Each time, he denies knowing Jesus.
And he gets more and more emphatic each time.
Yeah, growing more desperate with each denial.
It's hard to read those words without feeling a sense of sorrow for Peter. You could almost hear the rooster crowing in the background, signaling the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy.
Matthew tells us Peter wept bitterly,
Yeah.
a testament to the crushing weight of his betrayal and the depth of his remorse.
But even in Peter's failure, there's this glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Because he's devastated by what he's done. His tears reflect genuine sorrow, a
Right.
yearning for forgiveness.
It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, God's grace is still available to us.
That's such a good point.
Peter's story doesn't end here.
Right.
He will go on to play a crucial role in the early church,
Yeah.
becoming a powerful example of redemption and restoration.
It's a comforting thought, especially for those of us who've experienced similar moments of weakness and failure.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that God can use even our mistakes for his purposes.
He can.
So with Jesus condemned by the Jewish authorities and Peter reeling from his betrayal, the stage is set for the final act of this chapter.
We're about to witness the transition from religious condemnation to political execution
Yeah.
as Jesus is handed over to Pontius Pilate,
Right.
the Roman governor.
And that shift in power dynamics is crucial, I think, for understanding what happens next.
It is.
The religious leaders have played their part,
Right.
but ultimately, it's the Roman Empire that will carry out the sentence of death.
It highlights how Jesus' challenge transcended religious boundaries.
That's an interesting point.
He was perceived as a threat to both the Jewish and Roman authorities.
Yeah. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Matthew chapter 26.
Yeah,
You know, it's a heavy section,
it is.
but it sets the stage for everything that comes next. We left off with Jesus being handed over to Pontius Pilate,
Right.
the Roman governor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crucial shift in the narrative, don't you think?
I think so, yeah.
It's like we move from the realm of these religious accusations
Right.
to the political reality of Roman rule.
Exactly.
And Pilate represents that power of the Roman Empire.
He does.
And his judgment will determine Jesus' fate.
Yes.
And what's interesting to me is that Pilate seems almost reluctant to condemn Jesus.
Yeah.
Matthew tells us that Pilate finds no fault in him,
Mm-hmm.
even after questioning him directly.
He doesn't see Jesus as a political threat.
Right.
And he seems to recognize some level of innocence.
Yeah.
Perhaps even a spiritual authority that he doesn't fully understand.
But he's also keenly aware of the political climate, right?
Absolutely.
He knows the Jewish leaders are looking for any excuse to get rid of Jesus,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to create unrest.
It's a classic example of political maneuvering.
It is.
Pilate's caught between his own judgment and the pressure to appease the crowd.
And then Matthew introduces this incredibly dramatic scene
Oh, yeah.
where Pilate offers the crowd a choice.
Right.
Release Jesus or release
Oh.
Barabbas.
Right, a notorious criminal.
Imagine being in that crowd. I mean, what a stark choice.
I know.
Innocence versus guilt,
Mm.
mercy versus condemnation.
And yet, incited by the chief priests,
Right.
the crowd chooses Barabbas and demands Jesus' crucifixion.
It's chilling. It really is.
It is.
I mean, reading that passage, I always feel this unsettling feeling.
yeah.
It's like this reminder of how easily crowds can be swayed by fear and anger,
Mm.
how quickly justice can be distorted.
Yeah, and it foreshadows the broader rejection of Jesus by humanity.
Oh, that's a good point.
He came to offer salvation,
Right.
yet he's condemned by those he came to save.
It really gets to the heart of the human condition.
Right.
Our tendency to reject what we don't understand,
Yeah.
to choose darkness over light.
To choose darkness over light.
And then Pilate, trying to absolve himself of responsibility, washes his hands
He does.
of the matter,
Yeah.
symbolically declaring his innocence.
It's such a powerful act, yet so futile.
It is.
It really is.
He can't wash away his involvement in this unjust condemnation.
No. Ultimately, he sentences Jesus to death by crucifixion.
He does.
And with that sentence, Matthew chapter 26 comes to a close.
Yeah.
It's a heavy chapter, filled with betrayal, anguish, the looming shadow of the cross.
Yeah, but it's crucial to remember that this isn't the end of the story.
Right.
Matthew chapter 26 lays the groundwork for the transformative events of the resurrection.
Yes.
The ultimate victory over death and despair.
It's such a good reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope remains. God's plan is bigger than our understanding, and his love will ultimately triumph over all.
It will.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey through Matthew 26.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
We hope this deep dive has enriched your understanding of this pivotal chapter in the story of Jesus.
We hope so.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bible Chat for more devotional conversations rooted in Scripture, relevant for today.